everybody, I'm Fridel Capistrano. I narrate audiobooks. I happily spend time reading from my home studio here in California. You are listening to my podcast where I interview the authors I have narrated for. Thanks for tuning in to Readers on Writers. Nicki Pau Preto is a fantasy author living just outside Toronto, Canada. She studied art and art history in university and worked as a graphic designer before becoming a writer full-time. She is the author of the YA fantasy Crown of Feathers trilogy and the forthcoming Bonesmith, and The Last Hope School for Magical Delinquents will be her middle grade debut. Wings of Shadow, the final book in her YA fantasy trilogy Crown of Feathers, is available now from Margaret K. McElderry Books. Readers on Writers is like a small coffee table book club with our best friends. Our main goal is to learn more about each other in our respective fields, narrators and authors, and specifically regarding the book we are featuring. So take a sip from your favorite mug because it's time to welcome our special guest. Nicki Pau Preto, welcome!
Thank you so much for having me.
How is your summer going?
It's going wonderfully. I just had a birthday, so July has been pretty chill, but I do have several deadlines. Like I'm on one right now, so I do have to work, but I have been enjoying myself as well. So.
Good.
Yeah.
I love how you have all the books displayed in the back. Look at that. Those covers are beautiful.
They are so beautiful. I got so incredibly lucky.
I want to ask, how long did it take for the process of getting them illustrated so perfectly? They're amazing.
Well, interestingly, for me, traditionally published, the publisher does most of this stuff for you, right? And every author has I think a different experience. I had zero input, honestly.
Oh, no way.
So the Crown of Feathers, the first one, just appeared in my inbox, about a year before the book was set to come out, and I lost it. I loved it. I ran around my house. I was I was so pleased. But they actually they did a whole different version. I don't have it on me readily, but they did a whole different version. They commissioned a different look, and it was much darker, and they just decided to go against it, and then they went this direction. So there was much drama that I had nothing to do with, that apparently, not drama, but it took a few tries, and then they landed on this, and for me, it was just so perfect. Again, I had no input, I had no involvement. I can take no credit, but I adore it. And
it's amazing.
It's everything I wanted. It was very I remember at the time being nervous, not nervous, but it was trends and covers, right? And I'm trying to think at the time, I think Red Queen was very popular, which is very simple, kind of white background, a crown, a bit of blood, very simple. And it could be about anything. And I remember hoping that it was more specific, and that it was more this, I think, tells you exactly what you're getting. And I was just so pleased with it. It's illustrated, and there's been so many illustrated covers since then in YA, but I don't think it was really the norm then to have full scenes like this. So yeah. I was just so pleased with it. So pleased. They're all stunning. I don't even know. I don't know what's my favorite, but they're all amazing.
They're all so amazing. You look at them real close, you're like, oh my goodness. It actually, I don't know what it was, but I've seen the Wings of Shadow cover, I guess from the beginning of when I started, when I was presented your book. Mm-hmm. And only recently, when I was sorting everything out for the podcast, I was like, wait, there's someone riding the phoenix.
Oh, yeah.
Because I can see, I guess is that Avalkira in the back.
Yeah,
it is Avalkira in the back. Amazing.
Yes. Such a good cover. I remember once we got the Crown of Feathers cover, I was hoping we would get this is a Strix, the Blackbird. Yeah. And I was I want one on the third book. I want one on the third book.
And the eyes are so intense on the Strix.
Yes.
I love that cover.
I mean, again, I just got so lucky. For none of these, I didn't really have any involvement in any of them.
Mm-hmm.
By the third, they kind of showed me the rough draft, and I was like, yeah,
I'm into it.
Please. But I didn't say what I wanted. I didn't really contribute. So I just feel so lucky.
So I co-narrated on Wings of Shadow,
mm-hmm.
and I'm guessing you had say in who your narrators were. What was that like?
You are the only narrator that I chose. The only one.
That.
Yep. So again, kind of like the cover for the first book, the audiobook, I had no involvement. They asked me at some point, I think, for some pronunciation help. And I sent them like a list of some kind of like phonetically sounded out some things. That was it. And then one day there was an audiobook. I didn't pick any of the narrators. I had no input. I was very happy they did more than one narrator because it's multiple point of view, right? So each chapter is a different character. So I was like so happy we got multiple narrators. Very cool. I didn't get any choice until the third book when they said, we're looking for a narrator for Sparrow. Here's, I think, 4 options. Like, tell us what you prefer. And you were my number 1 pick. And that's only, you were perfect. I was so excited.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. I'm just
it was so cool. Like I said, it was the first time I ever chose. And, you know, they send you a link. You weren't reading my words. It was like to another book you had done, right?
Right.
Same with the other narrators. Like, it wasn't like the audition with a snippet of my work. It was just something else. So I listened through them all, and you just had this, like, the youthfulness that I think Sparrow had, but a bit of grit or something. I don't know. You had this, like, X factor. I was like, yep.
Oh my God.
So it was very cool. I actually got to pick you. You're the only one I picked.
And here we are. So special.
And you nailed it. You were so good in that audiobook. Oh, Sparrow is such a fan favorite. So I was really, really excited to be involved in that.
I love her character so much. I love her chapters. I listened back to them. I was driving back and forth from Northern California to Los Angeles a few weekends ago. And I was like, I'm going to listen to Wings of Shadow because I do, what's her name again? Oh my goodness.
Do you do more? I didn't even know. Do you do the epigraphs or whatever?
Yes, I do.
Oh, cool. You sound different. I know. I didn't think that. Yeah.
I forgot that I did until I played it and I was like, wait, that's also me.
That's me too.
Yeah. I loved Sparrow's character. I love how, like, I don't know if this is a spoiler, but how you sort of like allude to her lack of vision.
Mm-hmm. Well, she was, I mean, I was nervous, like she's in the whole series, but it's not until the third book that she gets her own point of view. And I was nervous, you know, she's a blind character.
Yeah.
But I think I was not lucky, but because of the way the world was and she has magic, I was able to lean into her magic, which is to connect with animals. So she uses animals to help like fill out her surroundings. So I think it gave me like, you know, sort of not an advantage, but like a unique way to kind of get into that headspace because I'm not blind and I can't, you know, tend to understand it, but I was able to kind of lean on the magic and how give it that. It helped me try and figure out like how would she see things, how would she feel things, like how would she understand things around her, and it helped for sure. I could lean on seeing through or sensing through the animals around her, so it helped me for sure. But I was nervous to write her, you know.
It was perfectly done, just like her visceral experience of the world and how like intuitive she is without being blatantly said. When I was introduced to the writing in her Sparrow's chapters, I was like, Nicki is like she's like, she's got this so honed in. And yeah.
Like I said, she's been a fan favorite. So I think I felt like the pressure to finally write her, but she's also just one of those characters that just kind of like strolled onto the page fully formed, which sounds so, like sort of like one of those nonsense things that writers say, I feel like, but she was a pretty late addition to the Crown of Feathers. Like I think I had already sold the book and I don't think she was in it yet.
Wow.
Or it was like right before I sold it. Like she was quite late. Like I think I might have added her when I was working with my agent. I can't even fully remember now. But she was just fully formed. And I feel like I just knew her intrinsically, even though she was sort of just popped in my head. And so I felt like I knew her, but it's one thing I found to like know a character when you're writing about them, and another when you're like in their head. It's like a totally different, you have to really like think double time about like what, you know, how they see the world. Again, like Sparrow being blind, I had to really like think about that. Like she took, I think, a lot of work, like even though she only has a few chapters, not that many, but
well, it shows the love and the meticulous care of those chapters.
I adore her. She's my mother's favorite. And for 2 books, she's like, there's something about Sparrow, I'm telling you. Like she's like theorizing. I'm like, Mom, I don't know. It's getting in my head. Oh, I guess she is special. You're right. But yeah, Mom.
I'm honored. I'm so honored to have read for her. It was honestly so great.
You were perfect. You really nailed it.
Thank you. I can't believe I was like first choice. I really had no idea. So what inspired you to write the book? I don't know if that's like a cliched question. Like, have you had it sort of like in your mind for like several years until Crown of Feathers came out? Like, what was that like?
I think usually for me, a book is in my head for probably a good year before I could actually write it. Like, so usually I think like when Crown of Feathers, the first book, when it was kind of brewing in my head and as an idea, I was working on something else. So it becomes your like new shiny idea that's like, untouched by the mess that you make when you actually try to do it. It was kind of just living in my head. And the book I was working on before Crown of Feathers, I had signed with an agent and we went on submission to publishers with it, but it didn't sell. And then that agent dropped me. So I had sort of a bad experience before Crown of Feathers. And for me, it was like, I wanted to work on something that was like really just for me. And I don't know if you've ever read Tamara Pierce. She's kind of one of the originators of like young adult fantasy. And she was a favorite of mine growing up. And I was reading her books and like it really made me want to tell that kind of story with like, she always had like really strong female leads, lots of animals and action and cool fantasy worlds, lots of magic. Like she's such a favorite.
I love that.
I feel like I was like thinking of her and I wanted to do something just for me. And it was very like, I mean, to be honest, at the time, like I didn't know if it was even going to sell when I was trying to get an agent. I had lots of agents say, this is great, but YA fantasy is a hard sell. And that was years ago now, and it's still selling so well. So even people in the industry don't always know what they're talking about. So, it felt like it was very much for me, even though I really wanted to sell it and I really wanted to be published. But it was very like, I don't know, it felt like a very personal project. I loved animal magic type stories.
Me too.
Yes, like I don't know. And I think at the time, Game of Thrones was kind of in its like peak. And I remember being like, there's going to be so many dragon books.
Yeah.
Like I want to do something like that, but there's going to be so many dragon books. Like what else can I do? And that's how I landed on Phoenixes. I'm like, you have a lot of the dragon, like you can ride them and there's fire and they can fly, but it was a little more unique. And that's kind of how I went in this direction. And it is kind of a unique, like Phoenixes aren't really that popular in fantasy. And so it was fun to kind of like go in that direction. But I think I was inspired by Game of Thrones too, like a lot of the world and these cool flying animals, how they would change the world if they were, in it. So
yeah,
it's hard. Like there's so many different inspirations, so many things that like, stew in your head for sometimes years until you finally get the book.
Did you start with thinking of the characters or the world first? I'm so partial to Phoenixes, so I think it's so good you get to like represent them.
Yeah.
in this epic story.
There's not a lot. So I felt like when I was building the Phoenix stuff, like I wanted them to be familiar as Phoenixes. So I didn't want to go too like out there. But I felt like I could invent a lot because, it's not that popular, I don't think, ultimately. Most people know what they are, but they don't really feature, I don't think, primarily in a lot of books.
Yeah, or their mythology or
exactly. So where did I start? I feel like most book ideas for me are a convergence of a few things. It's usually like a character idea, a world idea, and like maybe a plot or a magic. Like, so it's never a full book until all these things like come together. So at the time, like I said, I wanted to write something dragonish but different. And then I remember I love the girl dressed as boy trope, which features mostly in the first book. The main character, Veronica, has to dress as a boy to like sneak in. I just always love that trope. I don't know why. It was in the Tamara Pierce series, so like maybe that's why it was in my head. I just loved
There's always an element of like danger when that happens, and then like you can't wait for them to pull it off. And
yes, and there's like some humor to it. There's some girl power to it. Like
yes.
I don't know. I don't know why. I grew up with 2 older brothers. I don't know if there's something appealing to me about proving you can do what the boys can do. Like I don't know. That's always resonated for me. So like I knew I wanted to write that trope. I knew I wanted to write like something dragonish. And I had like an old note in, my story ideas about these 2 sisters who wind up sort of enemies. And I think suddenly, like when I mashed them all together, I felt like I had a story. Like, I'm like, okay, this is something I could do. And then so it wasn't necessarily one thing. It was kind of like the convergence of those few things. And then I was like, okay, so if this girl is trying to disguise herself to become a Phoenix Rider, what is the world like? And it kind of just like snowballs from there, I think. But yeah, it never usually starts with one thing. I think it's usually a few things.
It's a pretty excellent premise, though, I gotta say.
Thank you.
Riding Phoenixes, that's pretty epic.
Yeah. And, I wanted to make sure it wasn't, like the history of their society is pretty matriarchal, but it was more recently that they had sort of, the women had kind of been like pushed out of it, I guess. So it was kind of like a reclaiming of like the woman's space in this, world. It was built by women, so I don't know, I guess it was a little like feminist too. I was like going for that. I remember like writing the histories and like making sure there was lots of women in the histories, women warriors, women heroes. Like that was kind of top of mind for me when I was writing it.
Sometimes when I read a really, really excellent book, but sometimes I go like, wait, did this really happen? And then I'll start like Googling things and being like, is this place real? Did this person exist? And now that I have you here, I want to know how much of this was you, ground zero, entirely just genius.
Well, I won't lay claim to that term, but I mean, most of it is.
I'll just call it. It's me
fine.
endowing you with these loving words.
I mean, all of it was invented, really. None of it was deliberately based on anything.
Amazing.
I think when I think of my most obvious inspirations, like I mentioned Game of Thrones, like I think Game of Thrones, I don't know if you watched the show or read the book.
Oh, yeah.
Old Valyria, the old dragon riders like that, there's a long lost sort of Phoenix Rider civilization. And there's definitely parallels there. Like, I think I was really inspired by that. But, it was never like, it wasn't like, I'm doing my version of this. It was just like, oh, I love that. And I wanted to write something like it. But it wasn't based on anything really. Just whatever mishmash of stuff is in my head. It was mostly invented. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's funny years later, like I'll come up against things. I'm like, oh, that totally inspired this. And I forgot, like, you read things, you watch things, and they just kind of become part of the like soup of your brain. And then it comes out later, and it's kind of like, at times it's a mystery, right? Like even to you, like you don't exactly know where you got the idea from, but then eventually you go, oh, I saw that movie and that totally like makes sense that I'd go and write this after that. Like some reason, but it's like, you can't actually draw the lines always yourself. So it wasn't deliberately trying to mimic anything. Just.
This is your first trilogy. This is the first time
Yes.
you've ever written one.
Yes. It is.
Ambitious.
It is super ambitious. Oh my God, they're so long. There's probably like 5 or 6 books worth of page count in these 3 books.
Wow.
For sure. They're very long.
So when did you start?
I think in 2016 I started. I had just, like I said, I had signed with an agent with a different book. She had dropped me. The book hadn't sold, and I was like, I'm not working on that book anymore. So I wanted to do something new. So I think it was like early in 2016 I started writing it, and I was like, balls to the wall. Like I was really determined. Like I wrote it as fast as I could. I pushed really hard on it. I had actually like quit my job. So I was unemployed living in my mom's basement. Super glamorous. But I was like, I am writing this book. Like I am giving all I have. So I think it took me like, 8 months roughly from when I started it to when I was sending it out to agents. And it was much shorter then. We added like 60,000 words with my editor when we were working together. So it was much shorter then. So it was a shorter book, and I did lots of revisions with my editor. So it definitely wasn't like a finished product, but it was the best I could do on my own. And so I did it in like, I think it was around 8 months, which is pretty fast, I think. Like for the whole, I drafted it, I reread it, I revised it as best I could, and I was getting, sending it out to agents.
It's like a pretty amazing origin story. You're just like, bam, 8 months, even before a baby is made.
No, it takes you 8 months. It takes 9 months to make a baby. It takes 8 months to make a book.
Take note of that, people.
But that's just me on my own. Then I signed with an agent. We worked on it for a couple months. Yeah. And then I sold it to my editor, and we worked on it for a good 6+ months. So, the entire accumulation is definitely closer to like a year and a half at least.
And that was just Crown of Feathers.
Right. Yes.
Wow.
And then, that's a whole different experience, because then once you sold it, your second book, your sequel or whatever is coming out, like you have a schedule, right? Like when you're just writing on your own, you do the best you can on your own, but suddenly you're like, oh, I have deadlines. People are waiting for this.
Wow.
So Heart of Flames was really hard to write. It's the longest of the 3. It's the second one. And I'm trying to think how long that one took. That one took me a while. I had to rewrite a lot of it. Oh my God.
Was it difficult? Because tell me why.
Oh, well,
where do we begin?
How do I? Yeah. I think it was difficult. It was my first ever sequel, right? I'd never written a sequel before. Usually before you're published, you're just kind of writing first books, like hoping for someone to want to publish you. So it was my first sequel, first time writing on real deadlines, not just self-imposed ones. Also, like I said, we added so much. Like Crown of Feathers is 155,000 words. Most young adult novels are around maybe 100,000. Even less, 80,000. Like it's quite a long book.
Wow.
You're stuck at that level of detail, right? So then you come to the sequel, and there's more of the world to see, more characters to meet. So it just gets longer, gets thicker. And then like I said, I rewrote like half of it just because I had made some mistakes in my plotting, which is not my fault. So I rewrote a bunch of it. Yeah. Plotting, I can tell you so much about plotting because I've studied it so much because I can't do it naturally. Like I've studied it so much. Plotting is so hard for me. So I had like made some mistakes in the plot, so I had to rewrite like half the book. But it was so long. Like it's like 200,000 words. Crown of Feathers like 155. Wings of Shadow was 200,000. I think. Heart of Flames was 200,000. I think Wings of Shadow was like 180,000. So it's a little shorter again, but they're all very long. Yeah. Like I said, most YA books can be 80,000, maybe 100,000. So they're chunkers.
Yeah, I guess it just appeals beyond the YA genre, of course. I mean,
I think it does, genre, but sure.
You know,
and I think there's certain like genres where it's acceptable, and I think epic fantasy, you're building a whole world, so they kind of, they're more lenient with you having more page count to do that. It's multiple point of view, which definitely contributed to the length, because each character needs their own journey and their own story. I added in the sequel, two point of views. So Crown of Feathers had 3, Wings of Shadow had 5, Heart of Flames had 5, Wings of Shadow had 6. I want to say. So every time you add a point of view, you're kind of adding a big chunk of, page count. And
I think it's so fascinating that you're like, I can't plot. Meanwhile, your books are like wrought with many plots.
Well, that's a funny thing. I'm not good at it. So then I think I overplot. So there's like a million things happening. So I'm afraid that there's like, I'm like, there's so much happening here. Like, why did I do this to myself?
I don't know why, but I'm like imagining you in like a room and you just have like this huge whiteboard and it's just like Post-its of plots and lines and like string, like you're solving a murder or something.
Yes.
What is it like when you're trying to plot outside of your head?
I'm like that gif of Charlie Day from Pacific Rim when he's
doing the math.
I think it's Pacific Rim is from. Anyway, that's what I do most on the computer, but that's like, I remember sharing once a screenshot of my desktop and there's like 45 tabs open, 10 different Word documents. Like I'm like a disaster.
That's me on a regular day.
Oh God. I'm like, I don't know why it makes sense to me. Like, just leave me alone. I think the things that come naturally to me are probably like world. I just think it's fun. I like to build worlds. Like that's the fun part for me. And character, that's, I think a lot of us write for character. And then plots, like my first ever novel I wrote had no plot. I remember it was like nothing happening until the last like 20%. And I was like, here's a bad guy. Let's fight him. Like I had no idea how to do it. And then progressively, book by book, I'm like trying really hard to figure out how to plot. So I'm not someone who would I'm not a plot driven reader, but then when you read a book without a plot, you notice because you're kind of bored. Like it's one of those like invisible things that is so important. It's the whole structure. And if it's not there, you notice, but if it's there and it's done well, you almost don't realize because you're just enjoying the characters. You're enjoying, like, you don't notice it. But so it's something I was like behind the curve on, I guess.
It's such a humble perspective. Would you say your strengths lie in creating the characters and getting in their heads? Or...
Yeah, I guess so. Even that is something I've had to learn a lot about. I mean, all of it. I keep saying about, and I keep thinking about how I'm Canadian and I'm saying it wrong.
We're both Canadian. just come over and visit me, and then we'll both start sounding like each other.
Yes, maybe I'll sound more American. That would be nice.
No, Canada.
Yeah. Anyway, everything, like I think I've learned so much every book, every time. Like there's so much to learn. Even the stuff you think you're good at, like you have to learn more. Like your editor is really great for that. Like character is something I think that, like, I'm not someone who does like character worksheets and like questionnaire, like that. It's like once I know them, it's clicked and I just know them.
Yes.
But then when you actually write a book, like your editor's like, okay,
I need the groundwork.
Like you need some development, you need an arc. And so I've learned a lot about character, even though that's something I would have thought I did sort of naturally. World building is something I said I love to do, but the hard part isn't inventing the world. I have dozens of documents of all sorts of crap that never made it in the books, backstories, history, like so much stuff. But getting it into the narrative where it's not clunky and it's not like, boring is the challenge. And that's something I'm still struggling with. Like, I know all the answers to all this crap, but if you just throw it all out there on the page, it's like very boring for people. Like very few people are actually interested in all your nonsense maybe. So like then I have to learn how to refine it. So even the things I think I'm good at, like I'm constantly trying to do better. But
that is the formula to success.
Yes.
That constant improvement.
Yeah, I think it's good to not be too rigid. It's good to try. I think every book is, like I said, like writing my first sequel was a new challenge. Writing, like finishing my first series was a whole new challenge. Like, you know, wrapping everything up and making sure, you know, like there's always a new challenge. And now I'm writing like new books, and like every book is a little different. Every time you think you know what you're doing, you write something new and you're like, wait, this doesn't work here. You're always a student. And I think, you know, we have our things we like the best or the things that maybe come easier to us. But if you're not trying to get better at all of it, then I think, I don't know, I can't even imagine. I think I would be
stagnant.
in trouble. Yeah, and I just don't think I'd be able to do it. Like I keep coming up against walls where the things I used to do don't work. So you have to adapt or you're stuck, I think. So
that like problem solving mentality is so important, especially when it comes to writing books in the fantasy realm, because things are going to happen that you don't expect. And now your characters have to figure it out. And if they don't figure it out, the book is over.
Yes. And you know, you can't, like, readers are savvy, you know, if you try to force your character to do something that doesn't make sense, people will be mad at you. Like, people are like, no, that doesn't work. You know, we've all seen that on like certain shows, like when you try, people know your character, like,
yeah, we get invested.
They take what you've given, and so they know them. I think readers know more than I do sometimes. Like they'll remind me of stuff, or they, you know, they anticipate things. Like they're very smart. They can, you know, spot if you're kind of cutting a corner or being lazy or, you know, trying the easy way out. Like they'll know, and they'll notice. They'll tell you about it.
The fandom, was that sudden? Was it like, that's like a brand new experience? I don't even know what that could be like.
Weird. It's super weird. One of the weirdest things I realized early on was now with social media, people will message me in progress. So I'll get reactions from people while they're reading. You know, I don't want to spoil, but there's like a character death fairly early in Crown of Feathers. And this character winds up not being dead. But people were messaging me early and going, oh my God, how could you do that? And they want to put the book down. They want to quit. And I'm like, I think you should keep reading. Like, I'm like trying not to like
ruin it.
I think you should give it a chance. It was just weird to have. And again, like, you know, like things will happen early in the book and I'm like, oh, I put that character through hell, but everything's okay at the end. But people are talking to me in progress and they don't know it's going to be okay. So they're very mad at me early on. Like that was, I was like, oh, I did not think of that. Like I hadn't really anticipated, you know, I never had readers like that before really. So that was fun.
Would you respond? Would it be like a mass tweet? Like everyone, it's fine.
Well, I don't really tweet. This is mostly Instagram for me. And this is usually just people like direct messaging me or something. So I usually try to reply to say like, oh, like, I hope you keep reading or something. You know, I don't want to spoil them. And I try to engage as much as I can. I'm not, you know, some people are so famous. I came to Matt and must be inundated with messages. I'm still at the manageable place where I can usually respond or at least give like a little like or something. But you know, I like to let readers have their space. Like I don't like to be overly involved in the fandom. It just feels I don't know, wrong. Like it's not you're allowed to think what you think, and you know, like people have their theories, and like I don't like to get involved in that. It just feels sort of like, and I think you are totally free to interpret things however you want, right? Like people will say things to me, they think so and so is this or that, and I'm like, hey, sure, that's possible. Like, you know, if that's what you think, for sure. Like I don't think it's I think like once you're done writing it belongs to the readers and it feels like it's not really mine. But I actually did like a street team for the launch of the second book, which was just like a little Facebook group where people applied and we got to like do games and help promote the book. So I made some like stronger relationships with some of the readers through that. So that was fun just to have. It was easier to have a connection with them. It's hard like on the public social media to always like keep track of people who message you or whatever. So that was a little more intimate and that was pretty fun. But it's a lot of work too. So that was, you know, got to be hard. But that was, I think, my best way to engage with fans. Like if you're really into the books, like let's meet here and I can share, you know, news with you, share early cover stuff with you. Like, and they, you know, they seem to enjoy that. So that was, I think, the best way.
Isn't it so funny how like the idea of being an author is beyond just writing?
Oh, yes.
Right?
So much. Yeah. I mean, and like when I think of, you know, early on, I was very lucky early on before Crown of Feathers even came out, I got to do an event with Cassandra Clare, who's like mega time in YA, Shadowhunters books. She's had movies, TV shows, like she's a superstar. So I did an event with her and that was like a real like shock. I'm like, these fans are nuts, like in the best way. Like they worship her and they're so excited. And there was hundreds of people there. I was like, Oh my God. So a part of me was like, I don't ever want to be that famous. Like, that's like terrifying. But she's so good with, like, she was so good at it. I guess she's a pro now. She's been popular like this for at least 10 years. So she's an expert. But I'm like, wow, like all the events, all the interviews, like all the media, like that really is a whole job separate from trying to write these books. And I'm just like amazed at some of these authors that they still manage to put out books. Just all the, you know, the events they go to. And like I said, just the media and engaging on social media, like there's so much to do if you're in that like popular echelon. I'm like, oh my God.
Juggling both the writing and the public world.
Honestly, there's a lot of fun to be had, but I'm never happier than when I'm alone in my office in the dark writing books. Like that's what I'm here for. So that is like my happy place. So I would be, I think, unhappy if I was super famous. I'm like, oh, leave me alone. I just want to write. Like I'm not a celebrity. Like please don't make me.
It's funny. I'm the same way. It's like I both like enjoy my alone time, but also thrive on like the connection of others. I have a history of like I would throw parties. When I was in university, I went to the University of Toronto, and I'd throw parties. Wow!
It's for my grad school.
Oh, cool, but still. And I would have the tendency to like disappear into a room by myself for several hours, and I never realized it was like social anxiety.
I know, we didn't have the words for that, I feel like a few years ago. You're like, what's wrong with me? I'm weird.
I know, exactly. Like, it's just okay and better in here until I'm ready.
Yeah, like I can get up there around people, but then I crash super hard after. Yeah, and I need that time to, like I said, I go days where I'm like, just, you know, nothing on social media, nothing, because I need to like focus. Cut off and just be alone. And yeah, it's hard to create when you're, well, for me, if I'm busy chatting and emailing and doing all that stuff, it's hard for me to get that like focus I need.
Yeah, it's kind of like cultivating your own thoughts with just you.
Yeah, and it's, I think, a big part of the learning curve when you first start out, because you don't really know how to, because you have to write on schedule, and that's new, and you have to get it done. Whereas when you're maybe dreaming of being a writer, you write when you feel like it, when you feel inspired. But, you know, once you're doing, when someone's paying you and there's like a check coming and there's a deadline, like you have to do it no matter how you feel. So you have to be able to, like you said, cultivate that headspace. You have to know the tricks. You have to know what you need to get there. Or, you know, it's just like such a struggle, and it can be such a struggle sometimes, but that's like, I think, one of the biggest learning curves, like how to make yourself able to do it day after day after day.
Yeah, because it's work. It's work.
Yeah, it has to be. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You have to treat it that way if you're going to hit deadline. You know, some people still like will binge write, you know, like they wait till the end of the deadline and they go to town like day and night for day, you know, like some people still have to kind of like push themselves to weird extremes to get there. I'm pretty regimented. Like I write every day and that works for me, but everyone has, like, you have to know your tricks. You have to know what you can get done. And
so I have a question. I do follow you on Instagram, and it seems
I must be boring for you. I don't post very much.
Well, the times that you do, you're always digesting new books, which I love. And now that you're sort of on the other side of the reading, has that changed the experience of the actual consumption of literature for you? Yeah.
Sadly, it makes it harder, honestly. And it didn't used to be that way for me, but I think now that the books you read, they're your contemporaries, they're your friends, so like it does sort of change a relationship sometimes. Unfortunately, there's a lot of comparison I think that you can do, which can be detrimental, right? You read an amazing book and you're like, why am I even bothering to do this?
Because it's so good. Is that
why? Why do I even try? Like that can happen. This is not good for anybody. But I think the hardest thing is you're spending so much of your time already reading, writing, like you're tired. Like it's hard to get the motivation to stick your head in another page with more words, which is, audiobooks are like one of my favorite things ever. And they're such a great, like they saved my reading since I've been, you know, professionally published, because it allows me to read without having to sit again. Like you sit all day writing, you sit all day with, like, my eyes are tired, and it allows me to read while like on a nice walk, or like I'll lie in bed and listen, or like even doing the dishes, or when I used to commute for work, like I used to spend hours, I read the whole Game of Thrones series commuting from work. And that was a huge like hack for me to still read when I'm like so busy with deadlines and so bogged down with my own words. It's like a fresh way to read books, and that's been like huge for me. So loved audiobooks. Oh.
I'm presented with the same problem sometimes when I'm like, it's all the screen, right? I'm always like using my eyeballs. And sometimes I'll get a new book and I'll be like, oh, I want to read through it first but I don't want to read it twice, like not read it twice, but like I want to digest it as quickly as possible before I can so that like when I perform it, it's fresh. And I'm like, I wish someone would just read it to me.
It's super nice to have someone read it to you. Like I try to explain to people, I'm like, it's like being a kid again. Like someone's reading the story to you. It's so nice. But yeah, that's tricky for you because that's your job.
I'm like, oh, I have to read it to myself.
I'm the one that does this. But it's such a nice experience. Like I'm a big rereader too, which I know not all people are, but it's so fun to have read a book physically and then to read the audiobook or vice versa. Like it's a different experience, and like a great narrator can bring so much to a character. And similarly, like just seeing the words visually can be a different experience. Like I adore audiobooks. It was such a great discovery for me to get into audiobooks.
Yeah, it's so fun when I tell people I'm a narrator. They go, "I love Audible," and I'm like, "Yay!"
And like, it's pretty popular now. Like I think it's really boomed in recent years. Audiobooks. I don't know if that's something you've noticed, like for work and stuff. But
oh yeah, I mean, my first experience was the books on tape. I had a Winnie the Pooh.
Nice.
book on tape as a child, and I only realized like maybe just like a few days into like doing this, I was like, wait, this is a book on tape. I am reading books on tape without the tape. What world is this?
That's so true. We think of it so differently now.
I know. It's just
like they don't even sell physical copies, I don't think, of my audiobooks. Like it's all digital, right? But some people still get like CD discs. I think that's pretty much like on its way out.
There's definitely a demographic that still partakes in the CD purchases. I think
libraries will loan them out, I think. Yeah, I'm sure older people and kids, I guess maybe kids.
Yeah.
All the kids
or teachers, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe
I don't know.
Classrooms. Yeah, I wonder.
CD world. Maybe
like my nieces and nephews, they are like totally fine with like digital anything. They don't need that crap. Like,
have you ever seen? There's a meme, and someone's got like a hard, like one of the floppy disks, and then this child was like, "Oh, you have the save icon in real life." And I was like, "No, it's a
floppy disk." Oh, I haven't seen that. That's amazing. Oh, that's so true.
Wings of Shadow has. I'm going to name some of the characters. We've got Veronica, Val, Tristan, Sev, Cade, Elliot, and Sparrow.
Mm-hmm.
Do you imagine any of your characters in the future?
Part of the way I ended the story is I like the feeling that, like, I don't like endings that are too final. I like the feeling that the adventure will continue. Like when I think of just off the top of my head, like Lord of the Rings has like a real final ending, right? The adventure's over, we're back home, like regular life. I find that sad. I like not to whatever, like the Harry Potter ending, I remember really upset me because it was like 19 years later. I'm like, what?
I know. What happened in between?
Like, but he skipped all the good, So I knew I wanted something that kind of hinted at where characters would go, but left it open, but let you know that they were all still in the middle of everything, I guess. Like I didn't want things to be too final. So even now I hesitate to say where I think they will go. There's like one thing I got into detail with, but I don't think I can, it's too much with like one of the characters that died. And I just got into this whole thing. I'm like, that's probably not
existential.
Yeah. I was like, this is maybe not the place for that. But I kind of, Veronica is kind of on the cusp of coming queen, and she's still with Tristan. Will they, king and queen? I don't know, like probably, eventually, right? They're still young. Like I like the idea that probably, but not yet. They're still figuring things out.
Life. Yeah.
And like, Sev and Cade are just becoming Phoenix Riders. They're training. Sparrow, like they're kind of, they're training to become Phoenix Riders. So you assume they'll finish their training, they'll go out in the world. Like I think it's open, but you kind of have a sense of where they'll go. But I guess I don't like to give like too concrete an answer because I don't really know even. Like I think if I actually sat down to write it, who knows? Like I'm an outliner, but things happen that surprise you all the time. And I wouldn't want to like put things in stone because who knows? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'll feel differently in a few years or, like, so I like to leave it. So to answer your question, I'm not going to answer your question.
Just going to fantasize about the idea of the answer.
And I like to let readers do that. I think there's something fun for the reader to kind of imagine where they'll end up. And I don't want to deprive them of that.
I mean, hence the fantasy genre. We are.
Yeah, like, and readers, like I said, they have their strong theories and their head canons, they call them, like what they imagine will happen. And I think it's totally legit and they should. And that's part of the fun.
Do you think you'll continue to write fantasy? Is this like your place?
Yes.
Yes.
Hate reality. Well, I have under contract another YA fantasy coming next summer. And it's called Bonesmith, and it's a whole different world, and it's still YA fantasy, but dealing with like bone magic and ghosts and stuff. So it's so different.
Cool.
But it's definitely still, I'm always gonna love, it's still epic, like second world fantasy, a whole new world, whole new
beyond the grave.
Yes, it's pretty cool. It's been pretty fun to like research into that, and so that I'm like just finishing that up right now.
Congratulations! Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Thank you. And then I'm doing a middle grade book, which is going to come out in 2024, and it's about a magic school. So it's kind of like contemporary fantasy, but it's called The Last Hope School for Magical Delinquents. So it's a school for kids who get expelled out of like regular magic school because they've got some crazy magic, and it's been such a treat, and it's a little different than my young adult fantasy, which is maybe a little darker, and it's like epic fantasy. This is our world but slightly different, and it's just been, I don't know, it's been such a fun thing to switch between the two. That's why I had so many deadlines this summer because I have the two going.
I can feel like the urgency pulsing through you as you have to talk about these. You're like, I'm excited for The Last Hope School for Magical Delinquents because I feel like the characters in that are just going to be so colorful.
It's so fun to write, yeah. Humor forward, which is like, I'll put a little humor in, but this has been like really like looking for the humor and everything. It's been so fun to write, and it's much shorter than my other books, so that's been fun. But yeah, it's been such a treat, and just different enough to feel like a break from my other stuff, which is still kind of dark and more mature, I guess, compared to the kids' middle grade book. But yeah, so I do have more fantasy coming. I'll always write fantasy. I don't think I could ever write just a straight like contemporary book. I don't know what I would do. I don't know how I would get that kind of idea. My ideas are always like,
I'm gonna make you a t-shirt. I'm gonna make you a t-shirt that says "I hate reality," and then it'll say your name on the back.
Honestly, the number one reason why I read and write is for escapism. That's sense. When I'm here. I want out. I want out of this place. I want something better.
I mean, with the state of the world, it just seems
right. It's how I survive.
Gotta keep reading.
Like I can handle reality like on TV shows and movies, but like when I'm reading, I just want to get out. I just want to go somewhere new. So 100%, always something fantastical, like maybe historical-ish or maybe sci-fi-ish, but it'll always be like rooted not quite our world.
Yeah. Do you have any particular favorite moments in any of your books, or maybe in Wings of Shadow that we could discuss? Or lines?
Yeah, Wings of Shadow, it's, that's the big finale. I'm really proud of, and it made me cry though, the way things ended with Veronica and her sister Val, like, when they come to a head, their big battle, all their stuff. Like I was really happy with where I got with that. It was hard. It made me cry, which is unusual for me. I don't usually cry. But I feel like I hit the notes I wanted to hit, and I was happy with how that went. All of the climactic, like Seven Cade's storyline, their climactic moments, like that was a scene that was in my head for years, and I was, to finally get to write it was very cool. And I'm pretty happy with, the kind of last few chapters, like the ending. Like I said, I tried my best to leave it sort of resolved, but still feeling like we're in the middle of the fun. It's not ending. It's not done. Like I liked the note I hit there. So yeah, it's hard to peg like the moments that readers get mad at you for are sometimes the best ones, because you get a reaction out of people. That means they care. So that's, early in Crown of Feathers is, a scene that a lot of people hated me for, but it's the scene that made my editor buy the book, she said. So it's like, sometimes you got to go there like to get people to feel something. So I don't know, there's a lot of favorites, but I'm really happy with how everything ended. And it was very hard. The third book was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was so hard.
Wow.
Because it was just so many things to weave
Tie
together,
up.
you know. And the
Yeah.
final battle was like half of the book. Like it was hundreds of pages of like a fight scene. I was like, how do I keep this going? Why did I do this to myself?
Do you ever have moments when you're writing, like say like there's a conflict or something, and then you finally, like, I don't know if you're solving as you go along or like you know how it's gonna happen, and then you finally get it and you kind of like, yay, like you're celebrating at home. You're like,
all the time, like all the time. Even when I think I've planned it out, something will happen. I'm like, no, that doesn't work. You're always problem solving, always. And sometimes it takes like months, sometimes it takes drafts, and you're still not getting it the way you wanted to. And then you have that moment, you're like, oh, thank you, like thank you. So I feel like that was the entire third book over and over. Every draft, I'm like, no, it's not right. It's not right. Like this doesn't make sense. This isn't working. Over and over, you're trying to like. And it's hard because a lot of times it's sort of like epiphanies, and you can't really force epiphanies. Like they have to just kind of happen. And again, when you're on deadline, when you're on a schedule, there's not a lot of breathing room to be like, I'm just going to put this aside for a few weeks. Like that's just impossible. Like I was working on it constantly and I just couldn't seem to get it there. And, you know, it came out, I took an extra 4 months or something on that book. So I just like, there was so much to do. And I just kept like, I did like 3 or 4 drafts of it. Like it took me a long time to get.
Do you bounce things off your editor, with people in your house? Are you like sort of a
I'm pretty solitary in my writing. I tried to do those things, but I find sometimes like it is really great to talk to people, just to explain the problem to someone. Sometimes is enough to make you go, oh, like just to verbalize it sometimes. And I've definitely done that with like fellow writer friends, but I generally work a lot alone. I think early on in my career, I would involve people early, but I found there was like that too many cooks in the kitchen thing happening where other people's ideas would like influence my own. I'd be like, wait, like, and I would lose sight of what I was trying to do. So I find I have to wait quite a while until I'm ready to invite people in where I really know what I am trying to do before I can let someone else tell me what they think I should do. Because I think I was too easily influenced like early on. And I was like my first book that I've mentioned that I got an agent, but it didn't sell. That book changed so many times because I was losing sight of what I was trying to do. So I think I've sort of learned from that, and I have to be careful, and I play it pretty close to the vest, and I don't share a lot, and I don't have critique partners really. I don't really even have beta readers. Like I sort of just do it by myself because I wanted to be able to do it by myself. I think like I learned how to self-edit really rigidly. I like push myself. I'm like, I'm going to do this. Like I can figure it out. So it's usually mostly me. And like I said, sometimes I'll message like a fellow writer, like, does this make sense? Like, or, you know, I'll ask some people some things, but generally it's by myself.
Yeah, I mean that's really impressive, but also because they're so in depth, you know.
Well, it's hard
then you have to explain everything.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this happens and then this happens, but do you think this should happen? Because I mean,
yeah,
I don't know.
Like, what are you talking about?
And then it's like a waste of time. Like,
right, and
you know it best.
Right, and I think some people will lean heavily on their editors for that, and I'm sure like my editor is amazing. I'm sure I could, but like I said, I think I get to their ideas sort of mess with my head a little. Like, I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's just a weird.
I get it.
Like I have to. Yeah,
I totally get it. Someone has to know the work as well as you do in order for you to get to the goal of which you're trying to solve.
And like you said, sometimes it's hard to even like explain it. Like I'm not really sure what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah.
And like sometimes I just have to let it.
I'm the exact same way. I don't like letting people in too soon because then it's like, now you're not focused on the finished product because it's not a finished product. It's a work in progress, but then you have to explain that. And then you start getting like self-conscious or like confused.
Yes. It can really take the wind out of your sails, I think. If someone is like too critical too early on, it can really kind of damage the experience for you. I've had that happen to me too, where, you know, I had someone read it early. I'm like, oh man, like it just kind of, I'm self-motivated. Like I know some people need the push, like, okay, someone's reading it, some people need the push. I'm very critical. I'm more than capable of seeing all the problems. Like I get every time I hand in a draft to my editor, I'm like, okay, I know this and this is still wrong. And like you know, I'm very, like, some people I think have a hard time seeing their own work that way. I don't. I can see all the problems. So, you know, it works for me for now, but
with a premature opinion, it's hard to deal. So I totally get it.
It can really hurt your confidence. It can change, like I said, your perspective on your own story. And because so much of, I think, creativity in general, like it's all like opinion based. Like just because they think it should be that way doesn't mean it's the right way.
Yes.
And you know, so it's like I want to make sure I'm doing what I want to do first and foremost, and then we can kind of step back and try and
Absolutely.
smooth things out. But if someone gets in on the creative stage and then I'm like, wait,
Yeah.
I just changed this into something I don't even want to write just because they said I should, I don't know, it's a weird game to play. So.
Oh yeah, I think it applies to like, because I also do music, and so I remember
Mhm.
trying to like play songs for people in search of validation. And same
Mhm.
thing with like other things that I do, and I feel like the same thing goes for writing.
Mhm.
If you're seeking some sort of like, is what I'm doing right, or does it sound right? And then I've noticed that like this person's opinion would be different, and then this person
Yeah.
would conflict with that person's opinion, which I thought was right or true. And I was like, you know what? It really just has to go back to yourself and where
Mhm.
you think is right for you and what's
Yeah.
comfortable for you. And I think that's how you got to block out all the voices and just get to the finish
Right. I
line.
think, I think you're right. Some people, I think early on, and it's totally valid, like you're looking for validation. Like that's the whole
Yes.
point of getting an agent, the whole point, like you want someone to tell you you're good. And like that's totally legit. I think you do have to get to the point where you trust yourself
Yes.
and your own instincts. Because if you don't, you'll always be kind of floundering. Like, I think you have to get to that place. And it took me a while for sure. It's just funny you mentioned like different opinions. I had this like really clear moment when I was querying, so looking for an agent for my previous book. I remember in the same day, I remember getting an email from an agent who told me reading my book was tedious. And I was like, oh, like it was like a bullet to the chest. And I remember being like, I guess I suck. I guess I need to quit. Like I was like devastated. And then literally 2 hours later, someone emailed offering to have a phone call to represent the book. So I was like, that is like within a single day, two people can have complete polar opposite reactions to the same thing. And it was a real light bulb moment where I was like, this is all just their opinion. Like it's just completely
Yes.
subjective. Like, of course, there's things that can be errors, but generally, like, it's just about your artistic whatever. And I was like, okay, like, that really made it clear for me, like, just because someone hates it doesn't mean it's bad. Like, it was
Yes.
and just because someone loves it doesn't mean that you're satisfied with it or whatever, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, that was like I was like, oh my God, like, this is completely like,
It's
it
eye
just felt like a
opening.
crapshoot. Like,
Yeah.
who knows? Roll dice. Like, who knows?
Within 2 hours is very lucky, at least,
It
because
was a crazy
sometimes
day.
it's like you go
I
from like
remember
questioning your life to like being like, oh, I'm okay. I'm on top of the mountain again.
I literally, like, I got that horrible email calling it tedious, which I'll never forget that word. I was like, tedious? I like call my boyfriend and I'm like devastated, right? And then like 3 hours later, I call him again. I'm like, oh my God. Like whiplash from that day. Yeah.
Is that the agent you ended
No.
up sticking with?
No, it wasn't actually. It was the first. I ended up with like 3 offers for that. So that was the first offer.
Just got the ball rolling.
Yeah, and it's like I said, I didn't end up with that. The agent I eventually signed with, we didn't stay together either. So it was. Bleh.
It's a process.
It's very
It's a
rare.
process.
It's very rare. I don't know if it's the same. You have an agent, I assume, for like it's very rare in writing for someone to be with the same agent their whole career. Like extremely rare. Like most people will change agents multiple times in their career. So like I think people get really hung up on the idea of picking this like perfect agent, but I think it's like you do your best and sometimes it doesn't work and you move on. Like you can't get too caught up in that because it's very rare, like I said, to stick with one your whole career.
That's good to know. I mean, I don't know what it's like on the author side to find an agent for writing, but it's sort of the same in the acting world. I don't have an agent for audiobooks. I've been very lucky to have my voice sound like the YA genre.
Yeah, you really do have it's like youthful, but it has like some kind of like I said, grit. There's like something there. It's not quite like it's not just sweet. There's like I don't know. It's good. It was perfect for stuff.
Yay. Yeah, it's in a lot of it's kind of like what we were talking about, two different opinions. Some people go like stick with your agent, like it's a long-term journey and you guys got to figure each other out. And then other people are like I just switched mine like every 5 months or something, every 2 years, and I'm like I don't know.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, I'm sure it's wonderful to be with one agent, if it works that way. But I've just heard so many stories of things not working out, or like I was dropped by my first agent. Like that wasn't my choice.
And the market changes. Like the
Yeah,
market changes and the industry changes,
sure.
I think, in both worlds. And it's like, okay, well, let's keep problem solving.
Yeah, and just especially I think for writing, like each book, depending on what kind of career you have, you might switch genres, and then your current agent doesn't really do that, or like you just kind of it can it could be as simple as that. Sometimes like my first agent was changing her job and like her new title, like she just didn't really have the time. I was a new client, whatever, right? Like it wasn't really, it just is what it is. It hurts, of course. It was like, oh my God, I have to start over. Like it's like devastating.
That's what it feels like.
But you know, it's just like, what do you do? Like that shit, like I said, it's so many people have way worse stories than me. And you know, you have to just kind of, it's part of the business for sure. Same with editors, you know, like you sign with an editor, but sometimes they leave or, you know, like things you can't, you know.
Yeah. People.
Part of it is.
Exactly.
Keep on keeping on.
Ebbing and flowing. You just got to go with the flow.
You can't get too hung up. You can't control it a lot of times. Right? So
yeah.
You get yourself crazy over it, but.
So when you were younger, did you know you wanted to be a writer?
No, I was like a really late bloomer. I like didn't read at all until I was like 17. Like, I mean, I could read, but I didn't read books for fun. I didn't read at all. I was always a good writer, interestingly. Like I was good at grammar and stuff. Like I always did well in English class, but I never read for fun ever. I didn't even read the books I was supposed to read for class. I like watched the movie, you know, like I was totally a bad like student that way. And I just wasn't a reader, but I was always very imaginative. Like for me, I was a visual artist. Like that's what I initially went to school for. So I was a drawer and a painter and I was creative. And I remember wanting to play make-believe when I was too old to play make-believe. And that was clearly like the segue into world building and like, you know, inventing and writing, but I wasn't a reader. So I never really like connected those dots. And then I started reading, like I said, when I was like 17, like, so teen books was kind of where I started my reading journey. I think that's why I wanted to write them. So I had like a real learning curve. Like I was not someone who was, you know, nose in a book their whole childhood. That wasn't me at all. So, but I, you know, I remember reading, gobbling up fantasy books, you know, 17, like around that time, or the Lord of the Rings movies were coming out at that time. And I was very like, oh yeah, I love this nerdy crap. And I was like, yes, I want to do this. But I knew like I had like a long way to go to like read more and catch up. But so it was kind of a late teen ambition. Like once I started reading, I was like, oh, I'd like to try this. And then it just became like a stronger thing I wanted to do. But I knew it was a hard business. So I was like, okay, I wanted to be a professor of art history. That's what I thought I was going to do. And I was like, oh, I'll write books sort of like on the side when I'm ready. But then it just, you know, I hated my master's. So I didn't get my PhD. I was like, no, thank you. And I ended up pivoting and I became a graphic designer, which was super fun. But like, you know, once I had decided I wanted to write, it just became like a stronger and stronger desire. But I was not very literary as a kid. I was, like I said, late bloomer.
So when was the push for your decision to make the first book or write the first book? How old were you?
So I was still working as a graphic designer when I signed with my first agent. And we worked together on that first book, and it was like brutal to work 9 to 5. I had to get up at like 5 a.m. to write before work and then get home from work and write again. Like it was so hard. And I was like, oh, this is going to be like impossible to do both. But I was like really hating my day job at that time. So like long story short, I did the thing they always tell you not to do is I quit my day job and I moved in with my mother. And then I focused my attention entirely on being a writer. Before then, it was always like, in my weekends, my spare time, like trying to do it while I did other things. But it was so hard that way and much slower, and I'm very impatient. So I was like, you know what? Like I hate my day job right now. Like, you know, how can I like do this, focus my attention on this to give it a real chance? So quit my job, moved in with my mother, wrote, like I had some savings. I'm like, I will survive for, you know, it was about a year that I managed it before I had to go back to work. And I worked like super hard on writing and like I was doing like graphic design freelance and stuff, but it was like, this is my chance to give it all I had because I was just so sick of my day job. And I was just so obsessed with wanting to be a writer at that point. I was like in such a rush. Like I just wanted it so bad. So
I love that.
It worked for me. I dove in and it worked, but it was kind of, kind of a risky move, but.
I mean, we're also like glazing over the actual like specific challenges and tribulations that occurred in the midst of it when it was happening. Yeah. But I mean, going back to like graphic design is also a place where like there's so many opinions, there's clients, and you kind of have to go with the flow or you start getting annoyed by the things.
Yeah, it was a good lesson in how to let go of your art a little bit. Like, and I even, like I said, I went to school for visual arts. Like my degree is in visual arts, and that, every week we put our stuff up on the walls and kind of like rip each other apart.
Crits, yeah.
Yeah. So I learned early how to like separate myself a little, which I think was helpful. Especially once you start working with an editor, like they're going to criticize you repeatedly. You have to find a way to like to be able to hear it and not be so stubborn. You're like, no, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. You have to not let it destroy you. Like, you know, it's a tricky kind of thing. And I think I learned that from art school and then from being a graphic designer, because, you know, you spend hours on something, you hand it over and they're like, no, we're going to start over and do something different. You're like, you have to go, okay, with a smile. Cool. Sure. Like you have to sort of like take it in stride and be able to take feedback and to not to be able to let go and say, okay, this isn't mine anymore. It's, you know, which writing's a little more personal than that, but I definitely learned some things.
That's what I'm noticing is like the common thread in sort of achieving a goal or having a finished product is like the complete relinquishment of ego.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that in like some acting seminars when I'm watching other people's work and how they take direction, or even my husband's a writer and I edit his work because I consider myself a writer first, and I've managed to get this beautiful arc of this fulfilling way of being exposed to text. But I'll like edit his work and it's fun watching someone that you know very well like digest criticism and I'm just like sort of like patiently waiting to see like how it's going, what the output's gonna be. And I think it's a Canadian thing. I find us like very honest and very blunt, or maybe it's just me. I don't know.
Maybe I don't know.
But I'm very direct. So when I see something, I'm like, this should be better. You know, like you can call it out. You know, this can be better. Out of love, this can be better. You're better than this paragraph. Yeah, this writing is lazy. Like, what is this? Is this a placeholder for?
Wow, you guys have a strong relationship.
Oh
I would probably not be pleased if my boyfriend tried to tell me what.
I mean, it comes from a place of knowing. I think if I was like completely baseless and like unsupported in what I was saying, I'd be like, I don't actually know. I can't help you. But
right, which is my boyfriend wouldn't dare.
You know, like, what did you say to me? Who do you think you are?
Yeah, but it's true. Like it's how someone interprets it is huge, and when you have a good working relationship, it's really valuable. Like you two get together and like whoever's editing you, like it's really important that you see eye to eye. Like I've had author friends who like they get an edit letter and it just doesn't make any sense to them, and that's like a scary feeling when you're not on the same page. So it can be really valuable to make sure you have those right relationships, pick the right people, but you can't always have control, and you have to trust yourself and push back, and it's tricky. Like,
yes, I know.
When like you said, the ego thing, like when you're just being defensive and when you're like, no, I'm trying to protect, like what, you know, like I'm being like, it's a hard line to walk.
Yeah, I know. And I've learned to value like communication. Sometimes if like I feel like a certain way, like, or like I'm watching someone be like, I don't understand this, and suddenly you can see like there's like an obstacle. They've like blocked yourself up, and you're like, wait, let's figure this out. Like, let's communicate through this, because clearly we both have our own things going on, and I think we all want the same thing.
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah. So fascinating, just applying
the
experience of the world.
Yeah, it's you know, it can be really hard mentally, for sure. Trying to create anything, like trying to put anything out there is asking, and especially in this day and age where you're so accessible, people can just say whatever they want to you, and it's kind of scary. And like you got to protect yourself and trust the right people. Make sure you have people that will tell you the truth.
Yes.
And hope that, you know, and hopefully you can hear it, but also that you know when you need to fight back and point out, you know, it's
trusting yourself is definitely key.
Yeah.
Honesty is so important.
I think you're always honing that like instinct, your own instinct. Like I was working on like my next fantasy book that's coming out, like, you know, me and my editor were going back and forth on something. I was like, am I just being stubborn, or am I, you know, like it's a hard thing to know. Like, am I being defensive? Is this like, am I? It's like
the self-awareness is like so helpful.
It's like your brain's like, okay, just do it, whatever. Like, just forget it.
I have those conversations with myself too, being like, is this anxiety or am I just hungry? Like,
maybe it's both.
Maybe it's both. Or maybe I just need to sleep. Like,
yeah, good. It's so true. Sleep on it, like step away from it. Stop obsessing.
Yes, the obsession. I can't help but like obsess over certain things. And I'm like really particular. I'm kind of a purist about certain things. I don't know if that's how you are. I mean, I feel like with your visual art background and your graphic design experience, does that help shape how you visualize your characters in your world? Like, do you see things cinematically in your head playing out as they come out through your writing?
I wonder. I don't know what people don't usually say my writing is cinematic, so I'm not sure I see it that way. But I am very visual. Is it? Well, thank you. I mean, I haven't really been. I can't think anyone's ever said that to me. But I love, I've been told it's like I have lyrical writing, which I care about that. Like I care about the word choice and everything. But I am very visual, like the way the words look on the page, the way like I have to see. Like I've heard of, which is interesting because I love the audiobooks. I know some people can't do audiobooks because they need, like they get lost when it's just in their ears. Like they need that like anchor of the word. I've heard of writers who will like dictate. They'll like speak their words and they'll dictate like on like software that can dictate their words. But for me, I really need to like see the words as I type them. Like I think I'm really visual in that way. Cool. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a mystery, I think, like how it all comes together.
It's like meditative state for you. You're just
I think like being a professional writer and suddenly answering these kinds of questions, I'm like, oh, like you don't really think, I don't think about how you do stuff, right? Until someone asks you and you go, I don't know. You're trying to think of like a good answer and sometimes you just, I don't know, it just happens.
I feel like we should trade. You should ask me like a strange, difficult question about me, like narrating. I'll be like, you're right. I don't.
Okay, let's do it. Let me think of something good here.
Okay, yeah. Fine.
When you get a job offer, like do you get just the parts, like what do they send you to know if you're even interested? Like how does it work? Like how does the process happen for you on your end?
There's different ways. Sometimes like for your book, they had just told me like, here's a book, this is the deadline, this is the character, do you have the availability to record it? And I always say yes if it's being handed to me. Like it's been really serendipitous that my schedule just like opens up and then a new book comes in and I can actually do it. And I always feel like it's been crazy. Every single book I've narrated for, every character that I've had, everything about the characters have been so familiar to me. Like the talking to animals thing, kind of a real thing for me.
Nice. Can you talk to animals?
A little bit. It's a little crazy. I'm still discovering this magic talent. It's very strange.
Oh, cool.
I don't understand birds, which is really interesting because this book is,
yeah, it's all about the birds. Well, I'm scared of birds. People think that's funny when I tell them that.
That is funny. You're like, let's write about them to get over my fear.
About big birds.
They're covered in fire. So I'll always say yes because I feel like there's so much work behind the scenes that I don't know about that it finally comes to be presented to me and I go, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. The other way is I'll have to audition for it. Right. And usually I'll get like I guess like 3 or 4 pages from the book and then I'll go into my booth right here and then I'll just read it and then I'll wait and sometimes I hear back and sometimes I don't. But yeah, it's actually been really cool because I don't know. I haven't learned until I started the podcast that what the process is for finding me. Right. And I never knew that it was just like, here's like Friedel and like 3 other narrators and that, like I actually get chosen and it actually makes me feel so special when after I've spent so much time with your words and knowing after all this time, like, oh, this is really like a match.
Yeah, that's so true. Do you change? I've only heard one other sample from you. Mm-hmm. Like, do you spend time thinking about what the voice will be like, or does it just kind of come to you as you're reading it?
Depending on the writing, I find that the words dictate the character. Nice. Sometimes the author won't say, he said, and then it'll just be like suddenly quotations, and I'll have to be like, oh, like, who is this person? What are they saying? Like, it's very much like, it is very much the base of acting for me. Mm-hmm. So I don't really know how many voices I have in general. There's like a rainbow of different voices and it's mostly just based on attitudes and intentions. So that's usually how it changes. But I have one of the first books I read. I mean, I didn't realize going into this career that erotica was like the highest selling genre of audiobooks. And I was like,
audio.
I was like, oh no. So the first
I always think about the narrator when I'm listening to a book that has spicy scenes. I'm like, oh, this poor person reading. I don't know why.
Thank you, because
I always feel bad.
Yeah, because the first book I read was written by someone whose first language was Italian, and English was their second language, obviously, and so the erotica scenes were very like kind of not using the right synonyms, so it'd be like, so I would be the man's voice and the woman's voice, and I'd be like, hey, it's me. Oh, it's you. Like, oh my god. And I'd come out of the booth like, I'm sweaty and uncomfortable.
Oh no. But it's a skill to be able to do the men and the women, because that sometimes can ruin an audiobook if a woman can't do a man's voice or vice versa. They make it sort of silly sounding. Like, it worries
me. It worries me sometimes that
would be great now. And you know, when you were voicing the other, like when you were reading Sparrow and you were voicing like Kate or whoever, like it sounded good. It didn't sound like sound weird. I've heard.
Yeah, I know.
So I've heard narrators where they're like, I'm a boy, and they like really go for it, and you're like, oh, that's kind of too much, you know? Or
yeah, I think what helped with Wings of Shadow was like there were very clear points of view with all of your characters. So when I did voice Kate or when I did voice anybody else, it was like these people were talking to each other and coming from different points, and I was like, I can do that. But when it's just like this dialogue doesn't mean anything, and I go, I have to pretend. It's really all about the words, but I have to like be like, okay, let's just put more in.
put some spice in it, put some emphasis in it,
Exactly. So I don't sound like a boy, or so you know.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's really, really, really cool to be able to. I love books. I'm like obsessed with books. Anytime I like find a library in the area, I go, ooh, I love books.
Nice.
Like when I first moved to California, I found the Santa Monica Public Library, and I was with a friend who didn't know me very well. We had just met, and I went, ooh, I love libraries. He's like, who are you? And I was like, what? Don't you love books? I love books. I just like traipse into the library.
That's amazing. Oh, the library is good there. I don't know. Toronto library is pretty good. But
my god!
I usually do the digital. I almost exclusively do digital for the library.
I do now, but the TPL like raised me.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
it definitely.
Pretty good. I mostly went to like events in the libraries. Like but when I borrow stuff, it's usually audiobooks, so digital and like ebooks. I usually buy physical books. I don't know why. I like to keep them on my shelf, you know. But
do you have this sort of book hoarding thing where like you find a book, you get the book, and then maybe you don't get to reading it ever?
Yes, I collect books. I don't always read them, but I collect them. I haven't read half of these probably. I bought like 10 books in the past week. I'm like, oh boy, am I ever gonna read these? Who knows?
That's actually good to know, because I was a little intimidated. I was like, wow, like Nicki really reads books.
I mean, I try again, but like even the ones I buy physical, sometimes I'll listen to the audiobook. I never even cracked a physical copy. Like I like to have it on my shelf.
Me too. Especially if the cover is nice or you like the description. I'm like, I'm gonna buy this.
For sure. And there's something fun about like just when a book catches you, for some reason it catches your eye, and like something magical if you grab it and it's a great book, it just feels like it's meant to be.
I know.
I'm definitely a hoarder. Like I have way more than I could ever read. And then I usually just like give them to like my niece or like whatever. I'm like, yeah, like I've had a book for 10 years and I haven't read it yet. I'm probably not going to read it. So time to throw in the towel.
The same way. And I don't know if most areas have this, but there's like always those free libraries on the side of the road in some neighborhoods. It's like, take one. And I go, I really shouldn't. And I look and I'm like, ooh.
I try and put mine there.
That's the best.
There was one just around me here, but they took it away. It wasn't like, it wasn't like greatest. Like it just was like books that I wouldn't necessarily pick, but I put some of mine in there. But I'm just terrible for books on sale. Like there's a great used bookstore kind of near me, and like, oh god, I'll go there and look for hours, like just because for a deal, I don't know. It's like I'm like, hey, it's cheap. So that's a whole other thing. But no, I'm terrible for that.
That's so funny.
I'm definitely a book collector, sometimes book reader.
Always book writer.
Yeah, it's hard. I think like my reading is really slowed down. Just now I'm working on 2 books simultaneously, which is new. And I'm just like, I don't have the time to read it. Like, I know you're supposed to make the time, and I try, but my reading has really slowed down.
I didn't realize you were writing these next 2 books simultaneously.
Yes, I've been switching kind of back and forth between them. So that's been hard.
That is hard.
This fall is going to be harder. That's what I'm going to be doing. Sort of the 2, like with my editors. Like thus far, I've been managing them both on my own in my private time, switching between them, and now I'm going to hand them in and have to. So we'll see.
Because of deadlines, right? That's why.
Yes, and just having to coordinate the schedule means they do their best, but there's overlap, and I have to kind of just figure it out. But it's my first time doing 2 at once, so we'll see.
Amazing! I expect great things. I think it's going to be amazing. I'll be first in line. And those
you'd be a great narrator for the middle grade too. You have that right voice. You'd be great for it. I'll see if I have any sway.
You know how to find me.
Yeah, but I'm the perfect person. I said, I didn't pick anyone else, so I think I don't know if I'll ever be asked again. Like it's sort of it's different every time for every author, I think. So you never know, but
yeah. Ownership, Nicki.
I should really push. Like, look, I know an audiobook narrator. She's really good at erotica. I heard she loves to read erotica. It's her favorite, so I guess I should write some.
I was telling my husband, who does not he's not a writer of erotica, but he was told by someone he had sent one of his manuscripts to. He was like, oh, they don't really do that, so they kind of rejected me, but they do romance. And I was like, write a romance. It'll be hilarious.
Oh,
please.
Man. Yeah, it's definitely a female-dominated space, but who knows?
Just for fun.
Does he do just like novels, or does he do like TV and movies and all sorts?
So he's a screenwriter. That's what he went to school for. And then we were having, problems trying to figure out like how to get his stuff made. And and clearly a lot of the things being made now are like intellectual property. Nothing's original. So I was like, you know what you got to do? You just got to make a book, and then it's intellectual property, and then someone will make it.
And you could get hired to write your own script. Some authors do that.
Like reverse engineer.
It's a good time to be a content creator, just because all these streaming services, they all want stuff.
Yeah.
But it's still, whether or not it gets made is a whole other thing. But
I know, it's something for everyone. And
oh yeah, for sure. There's so much. I mean, there's still, I don't know, books, like if they're buying, I know for a while they were like buying so many books. I think it's slowed down a little, or at least in like, young adults, which is what I know most about.
Yeah.
For a while there, I remember they were buying up so many books, but I think it's slowed down a little, even before the pandemic.
I'm really curious about that, because I don't have kids. I don't really know anyone who has kids, so I'm always curious, like, what do kids consume nowadays? Like, are they reading? Are they listening to audiobooks? Like, what do they digest? I don't know.
Definitely, like, I know my nieces who are like, I have nieces and nephews. My nieces are the older ones. They love to read. They're big readers.
Amazing.
But I think that like it's more about TV. They love friggin' YouTube and like TikTok and these really shorter like platforms. So I don't know. I think they're still reading. I hope so.
Well, maybe let's hope they're like late bloomers like you. They start getting into it when they're like 17, 18.
Much better. The book's always better, guys.
I can imagine.
Always better.
Yeah, when I would go to the Toronto Public Library as a kid, my dad would go into like, the adult section, mature, older literature, and I'd go into like my young adult section, and I would literally like read the first 2 pages of a book and be like, fascinating. And then I'd start like a stack of them, and I would have stacks like, I don't know, like probably taller than my torso, and I'd have to bring them to the counter and be like, I'm taking all of these.
He's like, okay, dear.
Yeah, and he'd be like, of course.
No problem.
And then we'd get home, and I'd literally like sit on the couch and just like read book after book after book. And I was like, I love this. And I feel like I never grew out of young adult or middle grade. It's like, it's my favorite genre.
Well, it is, it's funny. Like, I think a lot of adults read those genres. And I think, because there's like coming of age, like it's sort of a timeless, and like some of the best like movies and the most iconic movies and shows are coming, there's coming of age characters on them. Like, I think it doesn't always get the respect. I think like kids' stories don't always get the respect they deserve, but like they're some of them are the most like foundational stories, like that, like the most popular, the most like, I don't know, it just, they're universal, especially if they're done right, I think.
Yeah.
Like if they're done the right way, they're like
The
we've
themes and
all
the
been
content. Yes. The themes and the commentary are always so healing and like
yeah,
like reflective. And I
for
can't get enough.
sure.
I think they're great. And then sometimes when
They're
it's like,
hopeful, you know.
yeah, they're hopeful.
Yeah.
And I love like watching characters grow and,
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes. And I keep mentioning Tamara Pierce. She used to do this thing. Like she did the thing where her characters aged up each book in the series, and I just always
Cool.
really loved that. Like because you get to literally see the character grow from like maybe 12 or something to like a teenager, and like it was this. That's a real like satisfying. I don't know. Yeah, something about that is so fun, and yeah, I guess it's just we all can relate to that time.
In your trilogy, is there a time span of years of when it like the story begins and the conclusion?
Probably like a year maybe total.
That's intense.
So,
That's
yeah,
so
it's
intense.
pretty close together. Yeah,
it's kind of like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I mean when I first was conceiving of the idea, I loved the idea of the characters like aging up, like starting a bit younger and then having them age up. But the problem is, you straddle age categories in publishing.
Oh.
So, because I thought with the girl dressed as boy trope, it's a little more believable if the girl is, say, 12 and not like 16, right?
Mm-hmm.
She hasn't gone through puberty necessarily. Yeah, it's a little more believable, right? So I was like, oh, maybe she should start younger and then grow up. But again, it's like, well, that would make it like a middle grade book, and then it would be a YA book, and like that's like too much for publishing to handle sometimes. Even though lots of book series have done it, it's just like one of those tricky things. So I just stuck with it being older, because I wanted there to be romance and stuff. So I was like, okay, fine. But I love that like concept, and I love that idea of characters growing up on the page and stuff. I think it's so fun. There's like logistical concerns.
I know the reality of behind the scenes.
Yeah, like if you're a super duper bestseller, you can do whatever you want. But if you're not, you gotta play by the rules a little bit.
So what are the things that you have to have with you to get into the zone?
I like to actually, one thing I've done in recent years, which has helped me a lot, which is going to sound kind of crazy, is I installed blackout curtains on my window so I can turn my office into a dungeon.
Nice.
And this is really helpful for me because for whatever reason, like daylight is really distracting. When it's a beautiful day, I want to go outside. I want to like do things. I'm like, no, you have to sit and stare at the screen for the next 8 hours. Like, no. So I can like black out my room, which is really helpful. Besides that, I usually start with a tea, some music, nothing like just sort of, I usually use like film or TV scores, like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. Like I love those kind of, without too many lyrics, right? Just orchestral or whatever. And that's kind of it. Music, computer, dark room. That's amazing.
It's like it's like the womb of creation.
Honestly, and I remember it's like a cave, literally, and I did this like I don't know if you've ever done like the Myers-Briggs personality type stuff.
Yes.
So I'm an INTJ, and I found another INTJ who's an author who does like a podcast, and she does a lot of like writing, like nonfiction books about writing and stuff. She's amazing. Her name's KM Weiland. Anyway. I was listening to her podcast, and she's INTJ, and she mentioned something about how her best, like we thrive without distraction, and like writing in a dark room alone is like our best like situation. I'm like, oh my God, it's so true. Like that's like been the best change I've made in recent years was to get those blackout blinds. Like it really, because it allows you to kind of make your own environment, right? So that you're not at the whims of the daylight or the rainy day or whatever it is. You just like block it out and you're in your own like sort of universe. And I was like, oh my God, I guess it's like a personality type thing maybe. But it so works for me. Like, I don't know, it just does.
Will you explain to everyone what INTJ is in case they don't know?
Introverted, intuitive, thinking, judging. Myers-Briggs, it's called. So basically, like I'm a judgmental introvert who, I don't know, like there's like writing courses based on your personality type. There's all sorts of information out there, but it really resonated for me. Like, and every time I've taken the test, like there's online tests for it. Every time I would get the same result. Like I'm really firmly in that category. But a lot of it really makes like sense for me. I am very introverted. And just the judging, like I'm very analytical and sort of critical thinker, and like that's in the judging category. And I'm not overly, like I think the feeling like I'm able to be quite like cut off from that stuff when I'm like creating and I'm working. Like it's just, it really resonates for me. And like, it's funny though, because it's a very like a villain personality type. Like if you look at like famous INTJs are all wackos. I'm like, oh, cool.
Count me in.
Like, it's like, oh, okay. Like, cool. Like, I think I might be a bit of a sociopath. That's okay. 1 or 2% of women are INTJs. It's kind of a rarer one. But anyway, they're all so very interesting. Everyone I know, I make them take this Myers-Briggs thing because it's always bang on. I'm like, oh my God, that's so you. And like, it's so like fascinating to me.
I love doing them.
Anyway,
I love so many different ones.
Yours?
Was like ENT, and it was the last one because it wasn't judging; it was sensing or feeling
or sensing.
Yeah,
feeling? Sensing?
I can't remember. I'll do it later, and then I'll send it to you.
Yeah,
like,
you should. I think it's so fascinating, and like I said, it's always been really bang on for me, and it really like illuminates. Like it helps you see yourself more. Like the circumstances that help you create, or like your relationships with people. It's just really interesting. But anyway, it was cool to meet a fellow writer who gives out writing advice, who had the same personality type as me. I was like, yes, like help me, fix me.
Blackout curtains.
Yeah, blackout curtains, right in the dungeon. It works for you. Don't question it. Do it.
Was it like a coincidence that you had already had the blackout curtains and then you listened to hers and you're like, me too?
It was very recent. Like I had just recently like bought them. I'm like, oh my God, like that's exactly me. It just helped so much. I don't know. I think it's, and we all have various like distraction levels and stuff and like focus levels. I think for me, it just helps like simplify. Like I don't, seems like internet and stuff, right? Like we all can tolerate certain levels of it. And it's really, the internet is bad for all of us when we're trying to focus and create things. But I'm not someone who's overly like distractible, but it just simplifies things for me to like be able to like cut off the light. I have my little lamp, like I have my ambiance. I'll light a candle sometimes. Like I'm in control of the situation. It just helps. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just works. What can I say?
I mean, I feel like I don't have windows in here. I would love to have a window one day because my sessions in here are usually like 4 or 5 hours long, and then I'll come out if I do it during the day, which I rarely do because of noise, like if cars or anything. So I have taken to recording at like 10 p.m. at night to like 3 in the morning because the world is asleep. I don't want to text anyone, no one can message me.
That's part of what gave me the blackout curtain idea, because I was noticing that my best writing was early when it was dark still, and once the sun had gone down. It was like in the winter, so like the days were shorter.
Yeah.
Because now it's sunny till like 9
p.m. Yeah.
But in the winter it's like 5 o'clock and it's blackout. So I was like, why am I doing so much better at these times? I think it is the perception that the world is kind of asleep, that nothing's really happening. It like tricks my brain into thinking like, oh, it's just you in this book, nothing else going on. Like, whereas if the sun, like, the window's open, the birds are chirping, people are out doing things, I want to be out doing things.
Same.
Like, yeah. So I came to LA is so, California's so beautiful. I would be like so distracted.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It was really hard. So we left LA in the pandemic because it was difficult. Right. And then my in-laws live up here in Northern California. So we came up here, and I was actually in the middle of like 2 books. So I was recording those books in my in-laws' walk-in closet.
Oh, nice.
But I was trying to get those books done at home in LA at the time, and it was like the riots were happening, helicopters were going off, police sirens, ambulances, and like, people were quarantining at home, so I could hear the neighbors' children home all the time. And I was like, this is not okay. I just want to work. I'm very tired. And I became like nocturnal. I think it was me like trauma, like processing trauma. So I'd be up for Eastern Standard Time to like check on my family. So I'd be up at 5 a.m. when they woke up being like, hi, are you guys okay? Okay, I'm going to bed. And then I'd wake up at like 5 p.m.
Wow, you like vampired it. You're like,
oh my God. Yeah. And then like in between I couldn't do work because I was awake. I don't know. It was weird. It was a strange time, but like here I am, and we moved to Napa, and this is the only closet in our house because it's
nice.
Old
now it's your studio,
and it's my studio, and my clothes are everywhere.
You record them all yourself, all the audiobooks yourself, or do you sometimes have to go into a studio? Has that ever happened? Like
actually, I just got a new title for Audible Studios, and I'll be recording in studio for the first time in San Francisco in the beginning of August. And it'll be really nice to be back in the recording studio because my history is like recording artists, singer-songwriter. That's like what I did
Familiar.
Yeah, do you remember Sharon, Lois, and Bram and like Marcus? See,
Yes.
Americans don't, so it's hard for me to explain that. Like, that's sort of what I started in grade 1. Our grade school teacher needed like a choir for Marcus, so I was like one of the kids in the studio singing like backup.
Oh
vocals.
my God, you're famous.
I think I have my name in the cassette tape like flyer. I don't know. My mom has that somewhere. But like,
is that a comedian show, Sharon, Lois, and Bram?
it is.
It is. Okay, yeah, I thought it was.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's cool.
I know. So I'm excited to go back in the studio since, you know, like we all haven't.
It would be like a few days, right? Or how long would it take?
4 days. I normally do like say 4-hour sessions here or like 1-hour sessions if it's a really long book. But I've requested to do 6 hours. 4 days back to back to back to back. So I'm gonna be like,
Yeah, like take care of your voice, and
I know.
I lose my voice extremely easily. Like one day out, and I'm like, my voice is scratchy. I mean, I have a scratchy voice anyway, but
I like your voice.
Oh, thank you. I've been told it's raspy and throaty. I don't know. People say weird things.
Throaty.
Yeah, like I can't remember. I've just had some really weird people describe it. I'm like, thanks.
I love it. It's really rich. It's really rich.
Thank you.
And it's filled with like a lot of personality.
It's distinctive, I think. Yeah, it's distinctive. When I was a kid, people used to call the house and think I was my mom. Because I sounded like, I don't know, old and mature. I'm like, okay.
Like, no, I'm a child.
Yeah, I am a child. But yeah, I have a very, like, I think a weak instrument. I like one day of talking, and I'm like, oh.
Oh my God, it scares me when like at the end of days like this, when I'm like in the booth for so long and like I feel like a slight soreness. I'm like, oh no, ginger, everything.
Ginger, honey, lemon. Yeah.
You know, just like pounding them back. Keep my voice from failing. Like,
you must know all the tricks.
I know some. I'm still learning some new ones. I just got like new drops for the next coming weeks and something called singing straws. We'll see if I actually use them. I don't like gimmicky things, but if it helps, it helps. So
yeah, whatever it takes, I guess. Right? I think of those. I watch a lot of basketball.
Yeah,
NBA.
Raptors.
Woo! And they're always sucking back like the fisherman's friend or like lozenges, right? Because they're yelling all day, every day. I'm like, what? Like, I hate those things. I guess if you're constantly yelling, you need like something. So I was
Altoids, yeah.
Yeah, like something, I guess, to keep your, you know, if you're like, home dry, if you're screaming for like 2.5 hours every single night, I guess. Like, I don't know. They have some abuse on their voices, but
you're gonna see this if you hop on Instagram. I was just in animation voiceover class yesterday, and we did our final project, which was presenting 12 of our voices. And I'm kind of an overachiever, so instead of just like reading lines from the characters I like wrote a script of like the characters in a classroom, and it's like a crazy classroom. And at the end of me doing this like almost 6-minute sketch of my own voice doing 12 characters, I was like, I'm just not going to talk for a while.
No kidding.
I was just like screaming at the end, like,
like I said, I lose my voice, so we like just, and I think now that I've become a writer and I'm alone and not talking most days, like I don't have a day job where I can talk to people, like I think my voice is like out of disuse. I'm like if I talk for half an hour, I'm like, oh, like I'm not used to talking to people. So I'll feel this later. I'll be like,
That's why I scheduled the podcast for this time, because my voice doesn't wake up until like noon Pacific Standard Time.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
Because before that, I'm like, hi, it's me.
You're telling me.
Hi, I'm Nicki.
Yeah. People wouldn't be able to tell us apart, but now we did.
Who's who?
Yeah.
Oh my God, Nicki, this has been so much fun. I feel like I could talk to you and just have a gas for like the next like forever.
Yeah,
I love getting to know you, and I can't wait for the rest of your body of work to come out.
Thank you. You too. I'm excited you're still doing audiobooks, and I hope you get to do more of mine. That'd be super cool.
Oh my gosh, that'll be cool.
They don't ask me, but I picked you. You're the only one I've ever picked, so you're my favorite, obviously.
Oh, no.
Oh,
stop.
Modest. Very Canadian.
No.
Oh, no.
Well, say hello to my home country for me.
I certainly will.
I miss it. maybe we'll touch base again soon. I'd love to have you back and
love
see how it all
feedback.
goes. Cool.
Thank
Have
you.
an amazing rest of your summer.
Thank you. You too. Good luck in San Francisco.
Thank you. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.